on the 7th of September 2022. Okay, so I can see that we have present Councillor Allison. Do we have Councillor Brogan? No, we don't have Councillor Brogan. We have Councillor Matthew Buchanan. Do we have Councillor Carmichael? No. I have apologies from Councillor Chalmers and I have Councillor Salamati substituting for her. I have apologies from Councillor Cooper. Do we have, sorry, I can see, yeah, we do have Councillor Cowan, we have Councillor Devlin, Councillor Dewar, Councillor Donnelly. Do we have Councillor Fagan? No. I can see that we have Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Ferguson Miller, Councillor Handybode. Do we have Councillor Horn? Apologies, thank you. I can see that we have Councillor Hose, Councillor Loudon, Councillor Hugh MacDonald, Councillor Catherine McClyman, Councillor Leslie MacDonald, Councillor McDougall. Do we have Councillor McGeever? Yes. Thank you. Councillor Nelson? Thank you. Councillor Razak? Thank you. Apologies from Councillor Ross, and we also have Councillor Scott. I can see that we have Councillor Bradley in the meeting. Councillor Bradley, can you let me know who you're substituting for? Councillor Michael's come in.
Hello, it's Councillor Horn I'm substituting for.
Councillor Horn. That's lovely, thank you very much. Councillor Carmichael, I see that you're now in the meeting. Do you wish to speak? Hi, Councillor Carmichael, you should now be able to speak.
And then, yes, I'm here now, Carol.
That's lovely, thank you very much. Okay, we also have various officers at today's meeting. I'll hand back to yourself, Chair.
Thanks, Carol. Do we have any declaration of interest? No. Thank you. Okay. Certainly, of course you can. There's an assortment for you to whichever one you prefer. Can I refer you to the minutes of the appeals panel held on the 9th and the 11th of August? That's pages 5 to 8. And can I ask if the minutes can be approved as a correct record? Right. Thank you. Can these be approved as a correct record? Thanks, Maureen. Moving on, Revenue Budget Monitoring 2021-22. That's pages 9 to 20. Jackie, could I ask you to speak for this, please?
Thank you, Chair. This is the first of our run of 4 monitoring reports on the resources budgets. The reason that there are 4 in this pack is because we are closing off the old financial year. This is the first committee since the end of the old financial year, and we'll also pick up the new financial year's figures as well. So the first of these reports is our revenue budget monitoring report. This is our day-to-day running budget report, and it's for the old financial year. I can report in the background for your information at 3.3. A point to note is that this report includes costs in relation to COVID, and we separated those costs out last year from the resources normal activity. And you'll see there's a specific appendix which covers our COVID costs. That means the figures that we're reporting here are quite different than you would expect. And at section 5, you can see that the year-end position that we're reporting is an overspend of £8.2 million after we've transferred some money to reserves at the end of the year. That's not the norm. It's quite a high figure, obviously, but this is covered from funding that we received specifically for COVID costs that was held centrally within the Council's overall budget. If we remove these costs of COVID, it leaves a break-even position for the resource for last financial year. Section 5.2 covers some of the costs in relation to COVID that contributed towards that £8.2 million, and that includes the low-income pandemic payments as well as costs for processing grants and expenditure to alleviate financial insecurities. Section 5.3 covers transfers to reserves that were approved by the Executive Committee both in February last year and then again at the end of the year in June. And these total £873,000 and are in relation to projects that will spend into the new financial year, including employability projects, funds for the National Trauma Programme, and also some community grants money that remained unspent at the end of the year. Attached to the report in Appendix A through to I are individual financial reports on the overall summary position for the resource in Appendix A, and then a page for each of the resource's specific services. And you can see there how each of those services performed in the year. Explanations for any significant variances have also been provided. In terms of the recommendations of the report, we're asking that the outturn position for the old financial year is noted and that the break-even position, excluding the costs of COVID, is noted as well. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Jackie. Do we have any questions? No. I'll move the report.
Agreed.
Thank you. Can we move on now to Revenue Budget Monitoring 2022-23, pages 21 to 30, and it's back to you again, Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. So we're back into the current financial year with this report. We're still on the Revenue Budget report, and this takes us to the 15th of July. This report follows what's been reported to our Executive Committee already. And again, at section 5, the financial implications are summarised, and we're reporting a break-even position for the resource at that point in time. Again, the appendices to the report show the summary for the resource on page 23, and then a page for each individual service for your information. And again, any variances have explanations provided there. So again, we're asking that positions noted and the budget variants that are included within the appendix are approved. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Jackie. Are there any questions on this item? No. I'll move the report.
Agreed.
Moving on to Capital Budget Monitoring 2021-22, which is pages 31 to 34. Back to you, Jackie.
Thank you very much. So we're now on to our capital budget monitoring reports. This is the spend that we make on our assets and infrastructure. And for this resource, the capital budget consists of spend on IT projects. This item 5 relates to the old financial year again, to close that off. And at section 5, we report that our programme, our budget for the year was £3.2 million, and spend at the end of the year was just over £1.9 million. Now, that underspend of £1.2 million is due to timing of spend on projects, including our IT infrastructure refresh, the Cared Centre project, and also the EV audiovisual project. The underspend in these projects is carried forward into the new financial year to allow those projects to conclude. This underspend isn't uncommon in capital projects, and obviously in a year where we were facing the pandemic and the outcomes of those, it was even more expected. I would point to the appendix on page 34, and that's a breakdown of the programme for the year, which, as I explained, is all in relation to IT services. So again, Chair asking that the position's noted. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. Any questions? No, I'll move the report.
Agreed.
Capital Budget Monitoring 2022-23, pages 35 to 38. Back to you, Jackie.
Thank you. So again, back into the new financial year, and this is our capital programme for this year. And again, this has taken us up to the 15th of July. So section 5 again gives a summary of the overall position. We have a budget of just under £3.7 million this year for our capital programme, and that includes the monies that we've carried forward from last year to complete the projects that I mentioned a second ago. Section 5.2 on page 35 reports that we've spent £270,000 to date, so slightly ahead of where we thought we would be at this point in time. Again, the appendix on page 37 summarises the overall programme, and as before, it's all on IT services. Again, asking that the positions noted. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Jackie. Any questions? I'll move the report.
Okay.
Moving on to item 7, Finance and Corporate Resources, Workforce Monitoring, April to June 2022, pages 39 to 46. Kay, can I ask you, please?
Thank you, Chair. And this is our regular workforce monitoring item covering finance and corporate resources only for this first report and April to June, as you said. In terms of the information in the report, in terms of attendance statistics at section 4, you can see the absence figure for the resource is 4%, up very slightly in comparison with the previous month, but 1.3% lower than the overall council-wide figure. And on that basis, we are projecting an absence rate for this resource of 3.6% for this year. And you can see in the detail at 4.1 that we're still experiencing in this particular period a fair bit of COVID disruption across the council. So 1.07% of the absence in that period were accounted for through COVID-19 sickness or special leave. As you would expect, given the absence rate that is there within the resource, we've been busy in terms of occupational health, and we had 64 referrals for this resource over the period. In terms of other information that's contained within this report, we bring committee's attention to the number of leavers on this occasion. So we've up in comparison with the same period last year. So with 13 leavers over this period, which is again fairly consistent with what we're seeing across the council as a whole. And I would just ask the committee to note the employment information within the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Kay. Do you have any questions? No. I'll move the report.
Agreed.
Moving on to item 8, Council-wide Workforce Monitoring, April to June 2022, pages 47 to 68. Back to you, Kay.
Thank you, Chair. And it's the same format of report, but this time covering the whole council for April to June. In terms of the absence rate across the council, that was 5.3%, down very marginally in comparison with the previous month, but still up in comparison with last year. And across the council, we're projecting an average absence percentage of 6.1% based on our figures to date. Got more detail in this report regarding the reasons for absence across the council. So you can see it's still at section 4, psychological and respiratory conditions being the main reasons for our absence. In pre-COVID, those were almost consistently psychological and musculoskeletal rather than respiratory. So you can see a fair degree of impact from COVID-19 there. But also across our other categories of absence, we're seeing an increase across the piece for a variety of reasons, whether it's access to supports, access to referrals, etc., and absence is just taking that little bit longer as a result. Section 5 takes you through detail regarding occupational health, and you can see there's lots of activity around about the supports that we have available to the workforce, and that's both to support an early return from absence, but also to assist people to remain at work. And I would draw your attention to the detail round about physiotherapy in particular, where 77% of those attending that particular support managed to remain at work over the period. Section 6 takes you through accidents and incidents, and we have seen an increase over the period, up 31 in comparison with the same period last year, mainly in the minor category, as you'll see from the appendices. In terms of other information contained within the report, draw your attention to section 8 and our labour turnover figure. So again, it's a consistent message that we can see across the piece. We do have an increasing turnover figure. It's still relatively low in comparison with other organisations, but for us that is increasing. So 4.4% we are projecting on the back of what we've got to date. And we are, of course, carrying out our exit interviews in order to catch up with people and find out why they've departed. And we managed to get 41% of leavers over that period, which some members will be aware that is a bit of an increase in terms of what we've managed to do previously. Because we are recruiting, because we have a number of leavers, we are obviously recruiting. So we had over 3,000 applications over this particular period. We had applications from 68 disabled candidates, 42 of which were shortlisted for interview, and pleased to report 11 were appointed. In terms of applicants from a black and ethnic minority background, we had 137, 41 being shortlisted for interview and 17 being appointed. And unfortunately, in terms of the veterans, we had 26 applicants, with 14 being shortlisted for interview, and unfortunately on this occasion none being appointed. And again, I'm asking the committee to note the employment information within the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Kay. Councillor McDougall, please.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Hi, there seemed to be a bit of a delay there. I was just to say I've got a couple of questions. Do you want me to ask them at the same time or one at a time?
No, if you want to ask them, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks for that comprehensive report. Just in regards to the recruitment, I know that you've obviously mentioned that the kind of percentage of, and there's obviously been a massive piece of work there, as you would expect in the council, that the percentage of successful candidates for disabled, BAME and particularly veteran candidates has maybe not been as successful as you would probably like. I was just wondering if there's any plans to engage with third sector organisations who might, or maybe you already do this, and bear with me as a new councillor, if you could improve, because I know, for example, there's thousands of servicemen and women leave the armed forces every year, and we manage to recruit 0. Where I work in the bank, we've got a relationship with an organisation that helps to, prepare people. So I just wondered so that was kind of question one. That was like how we improve BAME disabled veterans coming in, and their plans for that. My second one was in relation to page 68, where you do the split of the male-female full-time part-time for the workforce, and then a further split by pay band or grade for the workforce. But these aren't split by male, female, or any other category. And that'll lead on to my third question, actually. Would it be possible to provide this as a future metric in the interests of equality monitoring in the future? And is there a separate gender pay gap report done as an exercise by the council? I expect there will be. And then finally, sorry, this actually turns into 4 questions. Do we have a baseline for the demographic of the council workforce, and how that would relate to the demographic of the area in itself, to know if there's any targets? So if we had no veterans, 0 would be an acceptable number. But if we have, 2% of veterans, we would be trying to recruit 2%. That would give us something to target. That's my questions. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Good questions, and I'll perhaps send you the links to our Equalities Mainstreaming report that's got all that lovely data in it about the makeup of the workforce and how that compares and contrasts with the population in the area. So I'll send that off to you, and if you've got questions on the back of that, feel free to come back on it. Turning back to the kind of general recruitment questions, I suppose we're exploring every avenue that we can in order to try and improve some of the detail round about this. What we found, particularly when we're looking at applicants from an ethnic minority, we've done a bit of a deep dive in some of those areas over the past wee while, and that's provided us with some good thoughts around about how we can improve, how can we engage better with that community. And it's exactly the same with the veterans, as you would expect. We've been in touch with various agencies to try and encourage folk to come through there. In fact, I think we also had an employability route at one point for veterans as well. Because the veterans is a relatively small number in the report, I did go back and have a look at those who were invited in for interview, and unfortunately, in this group, actually half of those invited for interview did not attend. Some of which withdrew in advance, and some just didn't turn up. So, I'm quite interested in engaging and finding out why that's the case. I mean, we do find that in other roles, but not necessarily to that percentage. So, it's a question I've taken from that to go and have a further look at. And I'm just thinking, in terms of your question about the appendix, which is the staffing watch question, again, you probably see that in the qualities mainstreaming report. And I'm just wondering if I've covered off all your questions there. Apologies if I haven't.
I think you have. The last one I think was just the gender pay gap. And if you wouldn't mind sending me that link, I would love to see it. Thank you very much.
No problem. It's in that report.
Thank you very much.
I have no further, there's no further questions here. I'll move the report.
Agreed.
Can I move on to item 9, Treasury Management Activity, first quarter report, pages 69 to 76. Back to you, Jackie, please.
Thanks, Chair. This is the first of 2 papers relating to Treasury Management, which is a function within my own team that deals with how we deal with cash and deposits and investments in banks. We deal with borrowing and also the accounting for assets. So this first report is our Treasury Management Activity Report for the first quarter of this financial year, taking us up to the 30th of June. And this report takes a standard format that I'll report back to committee on a quarterly basis with. So section 4 covers what's entitled market performance, but it's really an update on the bank base rate. There's a bit of a history lesson in that section for you. And what I've done is I've actually taken it beyond the report date of the 30th of June to report on the more recent changes in bank rates, and you can see that there at section 4.4. Bank rates have changed obviously over the past few months, and we're now sitting at 1.75%. At the time of writing this report, our advisors on Treasury Management predict further increases over the coming months. Section 5 of the report covers the Council's debt position and our borrowing strategy. And you can see that over the page, on page 70 at table 1, you can see how the Council's borrowing has moved over the year. At section 5.3, we're reporting that we do have a borrowing requirement of just under £250 million for this year, and we've taken 57.8 as at the end of June. Now, we borrow for capital expenditure. We can only borrow for capital expenditure, not for day-to-day running costs. And that borrowing requirement covers borrowing that we required to take for previous year's capital programmes as well. Under delegated powers, the Executive Director of Finance and Corporate Resources will take the most appropriate form of borrowing, depending on interest rates at the time. Section 6 of this report covers what we call investment activity. Now, by investments, please read term deposits. Our deposits or stroke investments are really money that we place either with banks, high street banks, or with the UK government. I'll come on to that in a second. Our section, the Treasury Management section, deals with Council's cash balances, and these cash balances arise through a couple of sources. Either we've received income before we have to spend it, so if we've had grant money in before we have to spend it, that will result in a cash balance. And we also have balances due to earmarked reserves that we'll be using at a later date. There's a primary consideration for us when we're depositing any funds, and that's security of these funds. What we have every year is a requirement to report to full council on what's called our Prudential Indicator Treasury Management Strategy and Annual Investment Report. Now that's taken at the start of the year, and that details what permitted investments and deposits the council can make. And we'll cover that in a bit more in the next paper. Before we deposit any funds, we make checks to make sure that that institution that we're depositing money with is safe. That methodology includes the use of credit ratings, and again, I'll cover that in the next part of this report. Table 3 on page 71 of this report includes information on where we have deposited our funds over the period to June. And that table shows the majority of the deposits we've made have been with the UK government's deposit facility, the Debt Management Account Deposit Facility, or better known as the DMO, and through Treasury bills, which again is a deposit with the UK government. We also deposit money with other local authorities. So that's where other councils are looking for cash, and we will deposit that money with them. They will borrow that from us. Smaller amounts we've deposited within the Bank of Scotland and the Royal Bank of Scotland. Management of risk continues into section 7 of this report, and of course that's linked to the deposits we're making. And I mentioned the annual investment strategy that gets approved every year by full council, and that includes details on how we manage those deposits and the risk associated with those. And over on page 72, what we include in this report is details of the credit rating agencies. There's 3 of them, Fitch, Moody's and Standard & Poor's, and how the counterparties that we've deposited money with rate in each of those rating agencies. And what these tables show is that 97% of our deposits have been made with counterparties of a very high credit quality, which is the UK Government and other local authorities, and the remaining deposits we've made on instant access accounts with the Royal Bank of Scotland and the Bank of Scotland. We also include a graph as an appendix to this report which shows the duration of deposits that we've made, and all of our deposits are less than a year old. Section 8 of this report just reports on our plans for the next quarter and reports that we will continue with our current framework into the next quarter. And Section 9 of this report covers some indicators that are set at the start of the year that we're required to report on throughout the year. These relate to limits for debt. We set them at the start of the year, and I can report that our debt is within those limits at the moment. And also we set limits on the maturity structure of our debt. So that's us setting a limit to limit the exposure of a large amount of our debt being required to be repaid at any given time, particularly when we don't know what interest rates will be at that point in time. Again, I'm reporting that we are within the limits that we set at the start of the year. So that's a summary of the report, and if I take you back to the recommendations, we're just asking this is noted. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Jackie. Councillor Allison.
Yeah, Jackie, normally in the start of the year we don't borrow money, we use cash reserves. Yeah, I noticed in the report here we've taken out over £57 million worth of extra borrowings. Is this a change in strategy, a lack of cash, or why?
Thanks, Councillor Allison. You're right, we do have cash balances in the bank, so we would tend to use that before we would borrow. But what we've chosen to do this year is take advantage of interest rates, which were particularly advantageous at a point in time, and we've taken some of the borrowing that we know that we will need at that point in time. So we're still in a position where we have borrowing still to take, and that means that we still have the benefit of saving interest by not taking borrowing before we need it. So it's a bit of a mixed strategy that we're taking this year. We're still taking advantage of not borrowing too early, but taking advantage of rates when they're attractive.
Thank you.
Councillor Cowan.
Hi, sorry, can you hear me okay? Hi, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but hopefully you can. This is my first finance committee, so this may be, I don't know if this is a relevant question or not, but there was a lot of information there about where we deposit our money, and a lot of chat about how we check the credit ratings, and we check that these are safe places to deposit money. And my question really is, do we also check on the ethics of these banks, building societies and institutions? Do we know what they're doing with our money while it's on deposit with them? Thank you.
Jackie, could you take that, please?
Yes, thanks for your question. As I report in the paper, most of the deposits we make are actually with the UK Government through their deposit facility or through Treasury bills. But there is 2 banks that we've been using this year, the Bank of Scotland and the Royal Bank of Scotland. And both of those banks have their own policies around ethics and sustainability. So we would point to those particular documents, those particular parts of those banks that would deal with that. If there's any specific information that you would like to know about those particular banks' ethical policies, then I'm happy to get that for you.
Great, that's fine. Thanks very much.
Any other questions? No. We move on to item 10, Prudential Indicators, Treasury Management Activity and Annual Investments Report 2021-22, pages 77 to 98. Jackie, please.
Thanks, Chair. So this is a continuation of the theme of Treasury Management, and this report picks up again on last year's activity around Treasury Management. Now, we have a bit of a journey to go on in this report because we are required for some of this report to actually take the information to full council. I'll cover that in a second. So just in the background section of this report, it explains why we have to produce this report. There's 3 elements to this report. It covers our Treasury Management activity, and we're required to publish a report on this through our Code of Practice for Treasury Management that's published by CITFA. We also, as part of CITFA's Prudential Code, were required to report on a series of financial indicators which demonstrate the affordability, prudence and sustainability with regard to our capital financing decisions. So that is the Prudential Indicators part of this report. And as covered at section 3.4, there's actually a regulation, the Local Government Investment Scotland regulation, which requires us to produce an annual investment strategy before the start of the year, which I touched on in the last report, and also a report at the end of the financial year. And both of these reports are required to be approved by full council. So in the appendices to this report, each of those 3 areas are covered, but I've summarised the information that's included within the report. And again, some of this does duplicate what I've reported as part of the last report. So hopefully some of this will look familiar to you. So section 4 of the report covers the Treasury Management activity part. Appendix 1 gives you the full details. And what that particular appendix covers is the level of debt that the council has. It covers the interest rate, the pooled interest rate that we've had for our debt that we've taken. And you can see there's an improvement on the position since last year. And it also covers the total level of deposits that we've made. Again, all of those things will be familiar to you from the last report that we've made. Section 5 of this report covers the Prudential Code indicators. Again, this is a requirement through CITFA's Prudential Code. What this particular part covers is the capital expenditure that the council makes, and we report there that this is very much linked to the capital expenditure reports that's made to the Executive Committee every period, and we report on how that capital expenditure moves compared to budget. We also report on our borrowing position as part of this appendix. Again, familiar figures that we've seen before. And we're reporting that our borrowing is less than what we would expect, and that touches on the fact that we only took a relatively low level of borrowing last year and we used our cash balances in lieu of the remainder of the borrowing. Again, that gives us a one-off saving in interest, but we will require to take that borrowing in due course. And that underspend in interest has been used to support the revenue budget strategy going forward. Our need to borrow, covered at section 5.7, is lower than forecast, and that simply reflects the timing of expenditure and other movements in sources of capital funding. And we have an indicator that covers our borrowing and sets limits on the level of borrowing, again, as I've covered in the last paper. And in summary, all of our indicators are within the limits set. And then finally, at section 6, our annual investment report is covered. And as I say, this is required through that Local Government Investment Scotland regulation that we're required to report this to yourselves and then on to full council. Again, many of these areas have been covered before. That includes the deposits that we've made in year and the fact that these were all within the approved limits and constraints that we set within our original investment strategy, including credit ratings that we've made. We report that in order to manage any liquidity, we held on average £22 million on instant access accounts with banks, and we're required to report if we've borrowed in advance at any point. So that would be us taking any borrowing before we had to spend it, and we didn't in 2021-22. So in terms of the recommendations, these reflect the fact that parts of this report have to go to full council. So we're asking that the Treasury management activity and the prudential indicators covered in sections 4 and 5 are noted, that these are referred to the Executive Committee for noting, and on the investment report, which is on Appendix 3, we're asking that this committee endorses that we refer it to the Executive Committee prior to submission to the Council for formal approval. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Jackie. I have no questions here. Anybody? No? I'll move the report.
Agreed.
Can we move on to item 11, revenue collection and approval for write-offs, 2021-22, pages 99 to 102. Craig, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the report advises Committee of the collection performance to the end of March 22, the latest position in respect to the business rates incentivisation scheme, and also seeks approval for write-offs. Just in terms of a quick bit of background, responsibility for the collection of council tax, non-domestic rates and sundry debt rests with Finance and Corporate Resources. Section 4 of the report provides information in respect to the current collection performance, with more detail provided in Appendix 1. In terms of council tax for 21-22, the collection target was set at 94%. We finished the year ahead of target, just over by 1.5%. In relation to non-domestic rates, that too was ahead of target for the end of the year, finishing with 1.5% over the target. And in respect to our sundry debt collection, we finished the year ahead of target by just over 6%. Section 5 of the report covers the collection performance in respect of arrears, again with Appendix 1 providing more detailed information. And again, just going into each of the three income streams, council tax finished the year ahead of target by 34%, non-domestic rates ahead of target by nearly 22%, and sundry debt finished the year behind target by nearly 9%. Section 6 provides an update in respect to the business rates incentivisation scheme, which is a Scottish Government initiative to incentivise growth of the local business tax base, with a view to increasing non-domestic rates income yields. As previously advised to the committee, due to the impact of COVID-19, the Scottish Government previously confirmed that the scheme was suspended for both 2021 and 21-22 financial years. Section 7 of the report details the proposals for write-off for committee's consideration, covering a range of income streams, including council tax, sundry debt and former tenant rent arrears. I refer committee back to Section 2 of the report and ask that performance in terms of the collection of revenue be noted. The current position in respect of BRIS is also noted, and the write-offs, as noted at point 3, be approved. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
I've no questions. Can I move the report, please?
Agreed.
We'll move on to item 12, revenue collection and approval for write-offs, pages 103 to 108. Craig, please.
Thank you again, Chair. So a very similar report to the previous one, this time covering the first period up to June 22 of the new financial year. In terms of current collection performance, in respect of council tax, it's ahead of target by 0.07%. Non-domestic rates ahead by 0.2%, and sundry debt marginally behind target by 1.2%. In respect of arrears collection at Section 5, council tax ahead of target by 0.3%, non-domestic rates 2.4%, and sundry debt by 0.2%. There's no change to position in respect of the business rates incentivisation scheme. Nonetheless, we do continue to monitor performance there in respect of buoyancy. At the end of June, we see an increase of 0.27%. Section 7 of the report details write-offs proposed for committee's consideration, again covering the usual income streams. And I refer committee back to the recommendations. The collection performance be noted, the current position in respect of BRIS also be noted, and the write-offs at bullet point 3 be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Loudon, please.
Hi everyone, thanks very much, Chair. We've obviously got a considerably high amount of sundry debt which we've been asked to write off here. So I've got two related questions which are about school meal debt. Last week Edinburgh City Council had announced that they were wiping school meal debt which had been accrued from unallocated budget, and they were setting aside 128,000 to further alleviate school meal hardship in this coming year. I should say at this point, I appreciate that schools have I know our schools have an excellent record in making sure that pupils can still access meals if they're in debt. However, can I ask if the sundry debt figure which we've got here on 105 includes school meals debt? And has any consideration been given to putting aside some other money to mitigate hardship in the coming year, especially given the delayed rollout of P6 and 7 meals and the cost of living crisis?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. I confirm that there's no free school meal debt in the sundry debt figure proposed for consideration today. And we're looking at proposals around what we can do with existing debt there in relation to free school meals. And as you say, obviously, children obviously will receive a meal at school, should not be in position to pay for it.
Okay. And so can I come back in, Chair?
Yep.
Okay, in that case, I think our group were looking to propose an amendment to agree all of the other recommendations at the moment, but ask that the sundry debt figure, that's deferred at the moment until school meal debt is included, with a view to asking that to be wiped out.
Paul, can I ask you to come in, please?
Right, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Loudon. In terms of the debt that we're asking to write off under sundry debt, these are specific items, right? So that it's not an all-encompassing figure. So these are specific things that are on our books that we're looking to have written off. So something else that we choose to do doesn't impact on that figure. So that's why I would ask, and we are asking the committee to write off those things. Craig mentioned work that's been done around school meals debt, which is true. So there was work done at the end of the last financial year to look at what's contained within the council's balance sheet in terms of school meals debt and what's contained within education's records. Now, there is work that's currently being done through education with families at the moment to look at the position, and what we'd intend doing is coming back to probably the next committee with a proposal around this. Right, so it's just to clarify that amount under sundry debt and the relationship to school meals. This is other things, and that doesn't necessarily need to impact on what you're doing through this report today. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Loudon.
Okay, I know that my colleague Gladys is waiting to speak, Chair, so maybe hear from her first before we give that further consideration, if that's okay.
Chair, thanks.
Councillor Miller.
Thanks, Chair. I'm interested in the response that Paul has given. It will come back to committee with something particularly for the school meals debt. My question was actually just in terms of sundry debt. We always just see it as a lump sum, whereas I know that it's made up of different debts. And I was just wondering, what are they? Because it's always very high. I know that it's high in every local authority, but I was just interested, is there one particular area where it's higher?
Thank you, Councillor Miller. As you allude to there, obviously, sundry does encompass a variety of different debt streams, covering, for example, social care, rechargeable repairs, commercial rent. Obviously, from time to time can be quite high value, both individually and also collectively, and also as well charges in relation to special uplifts. Happy to provide more information at a future committee in relation to the composition of that, perhaps at a summary level by debt type, if that would help inform members on an ongoing basis. Yep.
Councillor Allison.
Thanks. Just a quick question. In light of the economic situation as it's seen going forward, has there been any thought given to altering the targets for collections of rent, council tax, etc. in the next year, whereas it won't make a difference in cash terms, it will make a difference to ongoing budgets?
Thank you, Councillor Allison. And obviously the targets that are outlined in the report were set back in March. I think it's fair to say, given the cost of living crisis that's unfolding, we're keeping a very close eye on our collection performance, and certainly the figures in the report today at a level of confidence in terms of our current performance in relation to the targets as they stand. It's something clearly we have to keep under review. We did reduce particularly the council tax collection target for 21-22 in light of obviously the impact of the pandemic. I think effectively a similar approach we'll take here to keep it under review, and certainly as possible we have to revise our targets as the situation unfolds, and obviously wait to see what further support for households can be provided by both governments that obviously may in turn affect our ability to collect the income streams that are outlined in these reports. Thank you.
Councillor Cowan.
Hi. Thank you, Chair. There seems to be a considerable delay. There's a considerable delay after you put me through to speak. I don't know if maybe IT could have a look at that. I just wanted to ask if perhaps going forward in future papers we could have more detail regarding just exactly how the sundry debt is made up. And sorry, I couldn't hear one of the previous answers, and it may be that the officer commented on that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I mentioned earlier there, I'm happy to provide some further detail breaking down the composition of the sundry debt write-offs for future committees.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Loudon, please.
Hi, thanks, Chair. Sorry, I seem to be on quite a delay as well. Fully support what Councillor Cowan was saying there about getting some more information on sundry debt. I do believe that would be really useful going forward. And just to confirm, thanks for that confirmation from officers there that we will have something coming to committee in the near future about writing off school meal debt. So I'm content to withdraw that amendment just now on the basis that that's coming. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Razak.
Thank you, Chair. Very trying conditions, they've done well there. I've got two quick questions. Firstly, the school meal that Councillor Loudon was speaking about. It's probably a question I should have asked education, is this being chased just now? If you don't know, that'd be good if you get back on that one. And the second one, next year is going to be the year I think that's going to be the problematic year because of the power bills that are coming through and the energy cost rises. And I think when we start talking about budgets and everything else, I think that's going to be the one that will be of grave concern, especially non-domestic rates and council tax, because people will be looking to cut back and maybe to try and heat themselves or stay in business. And I think that's when we'll struggle quite badly with the figures. Thank you.
Thank you.
A slight pause. Thank you, Councillor. I think in relation to your question on the recovery for free school meal debt, that's something that's approached by education. I mentioned as part of my introduction earlier that the responsibility of the collection of debt effectively rests with finance and corporate resources. What we do have obviously is a separate arrangement with education whereby they have obviously that visibility of the outstanding debt, and effectively they have their own kind of mechanisms there for discussing that with families. But I have to speak to education and come back to you with a more complete response.
Thank you. I'll move the report.
Agreed.
Can we move on now to item 13, 2022-23, Information and Communication Technology Asset Management Plan, pages 109 to 128. Brian, please.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report is to advise the committee on outcomes of the 2022-23 Information and Communication Technology Asset Management Plan. The background to this is the ICT Asset Management Plan is one of 5 areas across the Council where asset management plans are created. The others are noted in 3.1. The purpose of this is so that we can enable high quality ICT services to continue to be provided to meet the needs of the Council. Section 4 talks about some of the outcomes of the plan. It outlines the priorities and strategies that we need to have so that we can support the ICT asset estate so that we can deliver the services that are required by the Council. And a few highlights are noted. We'll complete the move from Windows 7 to Windows 10 in our PC estate. We've got a very small number remaining, and those will all be taken off the network over the remaining months of the year. We do have an ongoing programme of server upgrades, which will be one of our main activities throughout the year. For the first time, we're really having a focus on business applications within the asset management plan. Previously, it was mainly to do with hardware, but we're very much looking at business applications now as well. And we have some very big projects on the go, and it notes, for example, the Oracle Cloud Fusion project, which will replace the current finance, HR and payroll system. As usual, and as Jackie alluded to earlier, there's a capital spend associated with IT, and the data network takes up a good chunk of that capital spend. And again, we've got a large estate across our council sites, and we'll be going through a programme of replacement in the coming year. A couple of other things to note in telephony is that we've got some small telephone systems that are coming to the end of their life, and we're getting a replacement programme in place. We're now required to maintain our mobile phone estate and tablet estate to a certain minimum level. So we're working our way through some of our older Android phones. Previously, we could just sweat those assets. Now we actually have to start to upgrade those to the latest versions. So there's a programme of replacement there. And the overall asset management plan is shown in Appendix 1. Just in summary, the asset management plan, it gives a background as to what is the purpose of the plan, what are the objectives. It talks about the various assets that we have in our inventory and the asset condition. Is it red, amber, green? And then there's an action plan that goes through what are our main items that we plan to go through in the coming year to maintain assets to the required state. A key feature of this is also cybersecurity to make sure that we protect the council's assets and people. Overall, I'm happy to report that the ICT estate is in good condition, so overall it's green, but there is, as you can see from the report, plenty of work to do. So if we go back to the recommendations, it's that the contents of the report be noted and that the ICT Asset Management Plan for 22-23 be approved. Thanks, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Ferguson-Miller, please. Oh no, sorry. Councillor Grant-Ferguson. Too many Fergusons. Apologies.
Thank you, Chair. So I would like to speak on page 121, paragraph 5.2.1, legacy server operating systems. Now, I do have a few questions, but I wonder if I may ask the first question because the responses might answer the subsequent questions, if that's okay, Chair.
It is indeed, yes. Carry on.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Okay, so I totally understand that there's an issue that is currently being experienced by multitudes of organisations and compounded by supply issues as a result of Brexit. So the question I have, okay, as various organisations experience these issues related to supply, again, compounded by Brexit, I'd like to ask, are the servers that we are discussing Windows servers?
Yes, mostly Windows servers, yes.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question, if I may.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chair. Are they Windows 2008 servers?
There are a combination of different operating systems, and I would suggest that as we're talking about areas that impact cybersecurity, I would suggest that I'm happy to share that information offline with the councillor.
Okay. Now, I understand that some of these will be replaced from now up until 2023. Can I ask how much the council will need to pay in additional support costs for this financial year?
In terms of additional support costs, we have contracts with Microsoft and we have contracts with an external hosting supplier. That information will be wrapped up in that, so we'd have to come back with details as to whether there's any additional cost associated with this.
So there are additional costs, obviously, for that support.
I don't have the answer to that question. I would need to come back to the councillor with that information.
Okay, and I have a supplementary question, if I may. On page 125, 6.1, the action plan 2022-23. So the question I have is the constituents are emailing us every day with queries about sensitive confidential subjects. Now, if our mailbox is hacked, these details can be leaked. And the second last box on the table, which notes firewall hardware is end of life and filtering software services are end of support. So my question is this why we have been experiencing phishing emails? And I understand that the server refresh will be a huge time-consuming exercise. However, what is the timescale for replacing this crucial security infrastructure? And will this service be addressed this calendar year?
If I pick up the firewall, first of all, it is still in support and it will be replaced before it gets to that end of support. So there's no security implications there. I don't think that will have any bearing on the amount of phishing mails we're receiving, but I'm happy to take that as a question back to our security team and provide an answer, a more definitive answer on that. With regards to servers, we have plans well advanced. In fact, the work is well underway to replace legacy servers, and that will be completed, if not this year, it will be completed with a small number of servers in 2023. The vast majority of those will be complete within this calendar year.
Okay, thank you.
Are you satisfied with those responses, Councillor Ferguson? Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson Miller now, please.
Chair, I'm just conscious that it...
Yes, we are aware of the time, so but we'll let you in and then we'll move on. Yeah, take 5 minutes.
Okay. So...
No, she's away. Yes, she's... Yep.
That's it.
Yes.
User error. Picnic. Thanks, Chair. I would just like to compliment Brian and this report. It is so detailed. It's fabulous. Just everything, warts and all. And can I say, what an amazing effort by IT on the PC estate. You know, 1.3% left out of an estate of 6,800 odd is excellent, because I know that every organisation's got exactly the same problem. They've got a lot of legacy applications sitting on Windows 7 that they need to upgrade the legacy, upgrade the hardware. So it's been absolutely brilliant. And not only the fact that there's 6,000 odd corporate, you've got then 11,000 odd curricular, so it's quite a feat. Well done. In a similar vein to Councillor Ferguson, F2, I've got a couple of questions, and the same thing, they may be answered as we go along. It was just the size of the application upgrades. I was looking at it and it was a monster portfolio. I think I lost count, about 24 being underway and 13 being initiated, and huge projects. And I was just wondering, it says 22 to 23. Are we confident that will they be completed by 2023?
There is a programme of work that uses all of these applications. The majority of them, the big ones, will be. There's a couple of projects still to kick off, and they may run into 23-24.
Chair, can I?
Yes, can, yep.
So, see, in terms of the big business critical ones, will they be prioritised?
Yes, we have a prioritisation process where all of our projects or candidate projects go through a process with each resource, and they're assembled, prioritised, and then they're approved by CMT. And then we work with resources to make sure that we've got the right funding, the right resources, the right suppliers, if there's a procurement exercise to go through. So we've got a pretty well established and streamlined process to do that. So the biggies are all well underway.
Excellent. Last but not least, I'm aware that the projects that benefit other resources are actually paying for them, like the new housing system, etc. But the amount of work that's got to be done for IT infrastructure, and given that the capital programme that was approved way back in the budget for this year, I think it's 450,000 or something. Do you think that'll be enough, given the amount of work you've got to do, and you're having to follow legislation as well, which is tough?
Absolutely, the capital's in place, and it's not just IT capital, there's also capital used from various resources, not just for business systems, but also that can be for infrastructure as well, where it's dedicated to that particular resource.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Given that we are some 7 minutes over the allocated time, we'll now take 5 minutes, please, to allow the interpreters a break. Thank you.
I told him, that's why I was smiling when I said there was a break for the interpreters. I missed that there, aye. He was signing and I got lost and I was like, so...
I think the IT...
I ended up going on to that.
Yeah. I've seen it's very difficult to...
So, that there. No, is there a 42 seconds on? Please. So, in myth, double, that. Aye. Down. Yeah. No. Yeah. In. I don't know if you caught that there, but I was saying, I think I've just noticed that the italic text,
That makes it quite...
I've went down to here,
Aye, that's why...
and then when I've looked up to see about it,
Thank you very much. Could I ask you please to... Excuse me. Could I ask you to take your seats? Sorry. That's absolutely fine. Paul's here. You can talk to him. Thank you. And Councillor McDougall, are you still looking to speak on this item? Can I just say that there's a mobile phone going off and it's 2 or 3 times and it's different sounds, so it's obviously not just one person, but it's upsetting up here because we can hear lots of things. Could you make sure that you switch your mobiles off, please? Thank you. Right, Councillor McDougall.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you very much. So it was again relating to the ICT plan, which is obviously a massive part of what Council does and a huge responsibility for Brian. Lots of work going in there and fantastic work as well. So I just wanted to ask one question that I have in particular about the aims and objectives of the ICT plan. Make comment that they ensure that the needs of staff, elected members, customers and the public are met. And I see this as a common theme throughout the papers. There's also mention of constant reviews of software to ensure the assets remain fit for purpose. And I appreciate there's different reasons for that. It could be software currency as well as other reasons. So what I wanted to ask was, what is that process for monitoring, review, improvement cycle, and are they reported back, and how are they reported back in terms of expected financial and non-financial benefits for software projects? And I'm thinking, and as a new councillor, these are just a couple that I've come across of examples. So, for example, the new case management system for councillors and staff, and the new system that's been rolled out for in-home care for carers. So I guess the question really is, how are the users, staff, elected members, service users, whoever it is, how's that information gathered? How is that process of constant monitoring carried out to make sure there's any improvements can be made? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian, can I ask you? Yep.
Thank you. I guess the first part of the question was with regards to benefits and looking at how, as we install or upgrade a system, it will benefit the users. That's part of our process to, those are requirements, those are user requirements that get included at the planning stage of a project, and then we test those. We have user acceptance testing as part of our project implementation. With regards to the couple of projects that you recall, first of all, IT work with a customer who's usually the officer who's responsible for a particular department or particular function within the council. For example, in home care, we work with the home care team who specify the requirements and who provide us feedback during the project, but once we move into support, they also give us feedback with regards to how that particular system is working, not just from a functional point of view, but from a user point of view, from an inclusion point of view, from a user friendliness, etc. Does it work on the devices that IT give out to people? So we maintain the feedback with each of the resources, who in turn are in touch with customers who use their services. And we in turn go to suppliers, because many of our systems will involve an element of supplier support, and we have to involve them in that conversation if we want to request, for example, an upgrade or a change to that software. I hope that answers your question, but there is a full life cycle approach that we take to software.
Well, the only thing I would say to that, Brian, is that I've not seen any evidence of gathering user experience from either of those systems that I've mentioned. So I don't know whether that life cycle of monitoring, review, improvement that's mentioned in the constant monitoring of fitness for purpose is really working.
Okay, I mean, I'm happy to take that away and look at how that can be strengthened. What I would say is that in the asset management plan, it does have a red, amber, green rating against each of the business applications or software we use. That was done in conjunction with the users of those systems. So some of the systems, they're not actually out of support. Technically, they still work perfectly well, but they're no longer fit for purpose in the sense that users have gone beyond that and we want to modernise and have better systems. So, but I'm happy to take the point with regards to the ongoing, how do we monitor that, and I'll take that back to my team.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Salamati, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. On the back of my colleague's question and the response of officer, would we get the report back on the update on action plans back to this committee, please?
The action plans, we actually report that to CMT on a quarterly basis, and we actually report to individual resources on a monthly basis with the status of all the various projects. In terms of the reporting to committee, we tend to bring that, as part of this asset management plan at the annual. So I'm not sure, whether there is a requirement for that level of detail. I mean, I maybe defer to colleagues to see whether that's something we would want to do in future.
Okay, thank you.
Paul, please.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Salamati. Brian's right in terms of how the reporting cycle plays out and the route through which things get back to members. It's maybe a discussion we could pick up offline about the specifics of what you're keen to see reported, right? And we could look at that and how we monitor moving forward. And again, it's up to members what you choose to get back in front of you in terms of information. So absolutely open to having the conversation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
You want back in?
No, just thank you very much, and we can take it offline with the chair of the committee, and we'll see how it goes. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Ferguson-Miller.
Thanks, Jane. Paul, I would agree with Ali. I think there's so much in there. I know that the resources made an absolutely wonderful inroads into, getting the estate up to date, considering the size of the IT resource. But I would be interested in seeing how these are moving forward, given that they are quite crucial in terms of end-of-life systems, and if they need any more money.
Okay, right, Paul.
Oh, so I managed to turn myself off there again, right?
Oh dear.
No, it's not good. Listen, right, so I think what we just need to recognise is that the scope of what Brian does, or somebody in Brian's position does, has just expanded exponentially, right, over the past 20 years. Right, so the areas in which you've got information technology input, support, professionals working, has expanded right the way across what the council does. So there are things that are pretty technical around server applications. There are things that do get reported through other routes. If I think about updates that have been given to the Housing Committee about their system, and to the Social Work Committee about the mobile system in terms of the care scheduling system and the new system that is being put in place there, and also coming here in respect of the new version of Oracle Fusion. So there probably is a route, right, that we can go down, and a reporting cycle that we can arrive at that tries to bring together the data in a way that yourselves are happy with, right? And as I said, I'm happy to have a conversation about how we can put that together.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Paul. As you say, see, because it is reported at all the other committees, but we wouldn't want that level of information that we have today. That's fine on an annual basis, but no, I look forward to that and discussing that further. Thanks, Paul.
Okay, thank you. There's no further questions. I'll move the report.
Agreed.
Can we move on to item 14, Finance and Corporate Resources Workforce Plan 2022 to 2025, pages 129 to 138. Kay, can you take this, please?
Thank you, Chair. And we go from talking about IT assets to our most valuable asset, which is, of course, our workforce. So this report takes you through the finance and corporate version of the workforce plan for 2022 to 25 and highlights our key strategic actions that we feel are necessary. The original workforce strategy for the Council was presented in 2016, and at that point we set a 5-year plan in place, which I think Audit Scotland did think was the right period of time to pick at that point. We've now reviewed that and we've shortened it to 3 years, just to really reflect in the volatility of the kind of current things that are impacting on the workforce at this point in time. So we have a new Finance and Corporate Resources Workforce Plan, and it covers 22 to 25. Section 4 in the report explains the toolkit that we use in order to develop the workforce plan. It's pretty straightforward. So we look at what are the drivers that will affect our services, what are our future requirements. We then look at the detail round about our workforce. Have we got people with the right skills in place at the right time to deliver on these particular items? Then we do a fair bit of projection using some trend analysis that we have at any given point in time. So in terms of looking at our own workforce plan, there's been quite a lot of activity, as I'm sure you can imagine. I talk to you frequently about our recruitment and retention challenges. So in terms of ours, we've identified that some of the key themes that we'll be looking at, the demographics of our workforce, and again, through our equalities data, you'll be aware our workforce is ageing in a number of areas, and we need to look at what we do around about that. We've also seen some new features. So we're seeing earlier retirement, we're seeing more flexible retirement, and that has an impact on our succession planning arrangements. Our real focus in this particular plan has been about our ability to recruit and retain workforce in some key professional areas. And we're also looking at how we kind of bring through some of the skills that we're going to be needing. So in terms of actions that address the key challenges, well, we have put in place some revised recruitment arrangements, and I'll bring a report back to committee on our job fairs, which have recently rolled out, and that has been quite a successful experience across all our geographical areas. We're looking at more of a grow your own approach, so whether it's graduate apprentices or bringing people through a variety of routes into the roles that we find ourselves difficulty in recruiting. But we're also looking at our own working practices. What can we make ourselves more attractive as an employer through changing? And again, these are kind of common themes that come through from all the workforce plans. And once the workforce plans have been to individual resource committees, we'll bring the overarching council workforce plan to the executive committee. We know we have a reduced workforce pool, which does make, again, it's a very competitive market. Those that are inactive in the labour market, there's a bit of a changing feel in there. And probably the other component that we would feature would be around about employee wellbeing. And I've talked about that earlier in terms of the overall picture across the council in terms of health and wellbeing in the workforce. So obviously, if we don't have people in the right places with the right skills when we need them to deliver services, there are obviously risks, and we've seen that across the piece in the council, a very different set of statistics than we've had in previous years. There are key areas where we've struggled to recruit, and in fact, across Scotland, quite a lot of different organisations are struggling to recruit in the same areas. One of the things we've been focusing on is also about not robbing Peter to pay Paul. So if we make something more attractive in one area, are we just detracting from another workforce, again, that is in short supply? So As you can see in the report, there's quite a lot of activity around about the action plan. We're going to keep that very much under review. And I know from our own workforce planning information that we've gathered across Scotland, there's quite a fast-moving picture. So, this isn't a plan that will stay as it is over the whole period. We'll adjust according to the circumstances that we find ourselves in. So I would take you back to the recommendation and asking you to note the content of the report and approve the workforce plan. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Grant Ferguson, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to speak to page 135, paragraph 3, the current workforce and people skills required. So IT has 100.31 full-time equivalents. The question I have is that assuming this is full-time permanent staff and the requirement problems being faced in all resources and described workforce challenges, does the IT section have contractors? And if so, how many? Knowing how expensive contractors are and knowing that they rarely share and pass on those skills and experience.
Thank you, Chair. I suspect Brian will be better able to answer about contractors. I do know we do use some for some particular projects, but I'll defer to Brian on this one.
We don't have any, as it were, kind of permanent contractors within IT, but on a project-by-project basis, if we need access to certain skills or we need additional capacity in a particular area, then we do bring in contractors for that particular project.
Could I ask how many contractors we currently use, bearing in mind that the contractors are very expensive? I think it's really important as well to keep the skills, resources, that knowledge, that experience in-house. That is obviously how we develop, it's how we pass on to the next generation. And so, yeah, some information on that would be most welcome.
Brian, please.
Thanks, Chair. The number's quite small. I mean, I think it's less than 5, but I mean, I can get the precise number for the councillor. I can go back and check that number.
Yep, I'm happy with that answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gladys Ferguson-Miller. Goodness sake. Please.
Chair, it was actually a question about the system. I'm not sure if people have noticed that when Councillor Ferguson is on screen, he's not on screen. And I remember the testing when we were doing it, as soon as his mic was on, the camera was on him, but the camera's not going on him at all for some reason. And I know that there's always picture-in-picture, so we've always got the interpreter there. But what was happening was the person speaking, and for some reason his mic's on. So, you know, he's the invisible man, I think. I just wanted to point that out because I noticed it and I thought, I wonder if anybody else has noticed that. Thanks, Chair.
We will get it checked out for you, okay? Sorry, Paul. No, wait a minute. There you go.
Right, I suspect it's the way we're using the system. Earlier on, right, when Councillor Grant Ferguson was speaking, he was on the screen, right? But I get your point, not at that time. So maybe you just need to look at what we did differently during the meeting to make sure that's not the case.
Right.
Chair, if I may, obviously it's not something I've picked up on. I'm concentrating on, obviously, the chair and my question directed to the committee. I'm focused on the interpreter as well. So this is obviously would come under an accessibility issue. I appreciate a fellow councillor raising this issue. And I think online as well, Now we see someone on screen, you can see the interpreter, and as mentioned, we have picture-in-picture. But if there's a participant missing who's actually making a contribution, and I had noticed on Confero as well, this actually happened. If I can ask the chair to make a note that this happened on Confero, and I actually deferred to Microsoft Teams to access my interpreters. So this has happened online.
Okay, appreciate that. We'll certainly get it checked out for you. Councillor Cowan, please.
Hi.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I just wanted to talk about the difficulties with recruitment. I understand, obviously, that that's across the board through all councils and all throughout the private sector as well. And I know that, I'm not going to talk about wages. I know there's obviously been a lot of discussion about wages recently and money. And I just wondered if the council were thinking outside the box about how to recruit and retain staff. Maybe offering a better work-life balance with, perhaps a 4-day week, or, greater flexibility. I know that there's an extra day's holiday on the table at the moment, but, maybe working around that sort of thing, because I don't think everything comes down to money and to pay. And as I say, perhaps offering staff a better work-life balance would help to recruit and to retain. I just wondered if that's something that you consider when you're looking at how to recruit and retain. Thank you.
Okay, could you answer that, please?
I certainly could, and thank you, Councillor. It's another good question. In terms of where we're at, I think if you were to listen to some of the conversations we have across the council about, how can you introduce an element of personalisation for individuals, you're absolutely right. It's not always about pay, and through the pandemic, people have appreciated some of the flexibilities that they've managed to have, kind of built their life round about that. And indeed, across Scotland, we think that's also what might be driving some of the earlier retirals that we're seeing across the piece. So yes, I mean, we have got every kind of flexible working pattern that you can imagine available for people to access. And it is something that we're actively working on at this point in time, with a view to taking a more comprehensive paper back to committee covering all of these items. But I do encourage managers, whenever they're talking about recruitment issues, to think about, well, what else could we do that's a bit different? But sometimes it's not even about terms and conditions. Sometimes it's about scarcity of that skill set across the piece. So probably kind of folk had talked pre-pandemic about the skills shortages in social care, for example. As it happens, I've gathered some national data, both pre-pandemic and during the pandemic, about skills shortages. But we've got a significant shortage of some of our professional areas, and they're not coming through. So it'll take a wee while for us to grow our own, hence the comment round about kind of graduate approaches in some of our skills shortage areas. We are working across the piece and feeding that back in nationally, but it takes a while to get folk through universities, college, etc. And busy thinking about any other pipelines that we can possibly access, but just genuinely there's not enough available labour and skills at this point in time. So it is very difficult for resources. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. I do appreciate that. Obviously, there is a severe skills shortage. Do you also offer existing staff the opportunity to move within departments and to retrain? Because you can get stuck in a rut. If you're doing the same job for 5 years, 10 years, and maybe think, well, I'd quite like to retrain and go on and do something else. Is that an option within the council setup?
It absolutely is, and actually it's one of our biggest areas in terms of recruitment is amongst our own staff. You'll have managers having a discussion with individuals through their performance appraisal about what else they're interested in. In some of our areas where we're looking to perhaps address some of our gender issues in particular areas. So if there's a conversation going on with facility staff, which are predominantly female, have you thought about perhaps taking on some development and moving into a completely different area? So we do encourage that. and actually we get quite a fair bit of movement. Most of our recruitment is internal.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much. It's something I'm very interested in. So thanks very much.
No further questions. I'll move the report.
Agreed.
Now, we have items for noting, 15 to 23. It's my intention just to take them as one. I'll move these.
Agreed.
Do we have any particular questions? Yes, Gladys. Yep. Wait a minute, we'll get you.
I'm loud enough anyway. So it was page 184 on the resource plan, the Finance and Corporate Resource Plan, and 4B in terms of what actions we'll take. Action 3 talks about delivering effective employability services, delivering effective targeting recruitment programmes, and exactly just what Kay was talking about there. Now, see, in terms of the council's current social media adverts, it appears we've been talking to people and they're getting little or no traction with maybe like 1 or 2 likes. And, you know, we're wondering, there's other councils, we're actually competing with other councils. I know that we're doing that. Like, say, Glasgow was using television and radio. You know, and a lot of people saw it, you know, and it obviously on at prime time. So I was just wondering, are we looking at any other alternative types of marketing? And given that, you know, we've got Tom's team who, you know, they're the people that we should be talking to.
Thank you. Tom, would you like to? There we go. Thank you.
We have had quite a bit of success in recruiting through social media, but you've got to be quite careful about it, as you'll appreciate. If you're recruiting a job that's likely to appeal to someone who lives locally already, it's quite an effective tool, because we have 50,000 followers. Obviously, we get people who pass on likes and references as well. If you're looking to recruit someone who perhaps won't live locally, then you have to think about other ways of doing things, and we do a wide range of those kind of alternatives. We have been looking at targeted TV. We aren't rolling it out yet, but we're looking at different. It's cheaper than it used to be because you can target to local postcodes, etc., as well as having a wider one. So it is something that's under consideration, not imminently at this time, though.
Can I come in with a wee supplementary? It was a couple of colleagues and work colleagues were talking about doing videos for, say, particularly like social care, personal carers, and doing videos so that you know, to say, this is, you know, I'm a carer and I came into this with no qualifications. Now I've got my SQ3 and trying to attract people and attracting people into it. And I was also wondering, and it's probably Kay's department, about apprentices, about the possibility of bringing apprentices in and getting them to do, you know, an SQE and something, and hopefully then attracting them into the caring environment. Thanks, Chair.
There was one social work this morning. There was a couple of videos shown regarding it, but I'll let Tom speak on this.
Largely just what you said, Chair. We have done actually quite a few videos, especially in the social care sector, and people telling their case studies about why they've enjoyed the job and the appeal of it. Those have largely been up to now kind of short burst things on social media, but we have been developing slightly longer films, more detailed. And as the Chair said, you know, I reviewed some just this week and they were previewed this morning at Social Work. So watch out for those. Get your popcorn out.
Thank you. Kay, please.
Thank you. Just to kind of finish off some of that. So actually we get really positive feedback from the social media that in terms of the applicants coming through. Obviously we use all of our strands, so kind of whether it's Facebook and people sharing on Facebook, they're maybe not liking but they're certainly commenting, and we're seeing the applicants come through from that. But it's a bit like everything else, isn't it? We like information the way that we like it, and what attracts a 21-year-old might not necessarily be the same thing that would attract kind of folk like myself, for example. So, in addition to the things that Tom's already talked about, we also target through LinkedIn, through professional groups. So if we're looking for something specific, we get a message out through the social media group that's pertinent to that group, and we're open to suggestions from anywhere else. But actually, I touched earlier on the job fairs and the point that you make about individuals telling a story about how they came through. That has been really powerful and has proven to be quite successful on our social care side, where we've got a good number of applicants out of that process. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Salamati, please.
Right, thank you. I have a question in section 18, if I may ask.
Yep.
Yeah. Earlier on, in response to Councillor McDougall's question in section 8, Kay has referred to Council's Equalities mainstreaming report for 2019 to 2021. I had a look, and I was interested in race equality reports. And on page 45 of the report, it mentions it has Council's employees has increased in terms of BME communities from 0.85 to just above 1%. We know it's not really representative of demography of South Lanarkshire Council area population. My question is, do we have any target or any plan to increase that and address this deficiency? And also, the report does not kind of clarify or clearly mentions that which grades this 1% are kind of, they're employed in. And as we know, it's important in terms of kind of, the retention and progression and staff motivation. So it would be useful to have this information, and if you can share it with the committee, and if there's any plan, if not, what are we going to do with it? Please, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think, as you're probably aware, the census information that we compare and contrast with, we're keenly awaiting the new census information, so we've got more up to date. And I suppose it kind of, we've been looking at the data there, and it depends whether you're looking at working age population, etc., etc. So it's quite in depth, and we will, of course, bring new information back, particularly once we've got the new census information, to get a more detailed analysis of that. In terms of the grade information, that's pretty straightforward. I think, from memory, I'm not sure that's the detail of that is necessarily contained within that report, but the pay gap information is, and unlike the gender pay gap, it's the other way around. So it's more positive for that community. But I'll try and see what we can get round about the background of that particular data and get that back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There's no further questions, and I have no items of urgent business. So can I say thank you all for attending today, please, and have a lovely afternoon. Thank you.